Hey everyone, welcome back to Totally His. This week we are going to finally finish up our story of Joseph. Okay, we spent quite a few weeks on Joseph, and so this week our main theme is going to be forgiveness. Okay, we're going to talk about what should we do when someone does something so bad to us that we just can't stand it. We don't like the person, we might even hate the person. But God obviously always wants us to be able to forgive others. And so we're going to look at Joseph's story and see how he was able to forgive and why exactly he was able to forgive. Okay? So let's start back with what we've been talking about these past few weeks, where Joseph was doing his thing and his brothers didn't like him, and we already talked about those reasons. And so his brothers sold him off as a slave. And so Joseph, as a slave, worked his way up. He continued doing what God wanted him to do. And then he got in trouble for something he didn't do and got put in prison, but continued doing what God wanted him to do and worked his way up all the way to the point where he helps Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, with a task. And then the Pharaoh puts him in charge of all kinds of stuff. He basically makes him second in charge of the entire country, and Joseph helps the country through this 7 year famine in which there was no food. Okay, now hopefully you guys have had a chance to read about the story of Joseph. It starts in Genesis chapter 37 and goes all the way through. And Joseph was able to help millions of people, including his own brothers. He helped his own brothers. His brothers needed food, and Joseph had some stored away from them. And so his brothers come back into the picture and they realize, wait a minute, Joseph isn't dead. And so they kind of get back together and stuff. Joseph sees his father again. But we're going to skip all the way to the end of this story. We're going to skip to the end, all the way to chapter 50 in Genesis. Because something happens and all of a sudden things turn. Because at first, everybody was happy to see each other. But then the brothers realized something. Okay, so let's pick it up. Chapter 50, verse 15 in Genesis. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, okay, Joseph's father died, and all of a sudden now his brothers are like, ooh, wait a second. What if Joseph has a plan to hurt us? Okay, what if he was just being nice to us because dad was around? Okay, how many of you have noticed that you act differently around your brothers or sisters when your parents are around? If mom or dad's not around, all of a sudden you start acting differently. Guess what? That's what they were worried about right here. They're like, man, what if he's going to try and get us back for all the wrong that we did? We sold him into slavery, and so now he might want to try and get us back. And so it says, okay, right here in that verse 15, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to him. And so here's what they did. They sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of your servants, of the God of your father. In other words, here's what they said. They were like, hey, Joseph, don't do anything bad to us, okay? Dad, right before he died, he said he wanted you to forgive us. Okay, in other words, they know how much Joseph loved his father. And so they were trying to lie to get out of being in trouble with Joseph, okay? But here's the thing. Look at how Joseph reacts to this. It says, Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Joseph started crying. And I think part of it was he knew they were lying. He knew they were lying about this. And number two, I think he knew, hey, my brothers are scared of me. They're my brothers. My brothers should not be scared of me, that I'm going to do evil. Why are they thinking this? Okay? And so in verse 18, it says, his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But then Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? In other words, he's like, guys, I'm not the one who's going to come after you. He's like, hey, if you did something wrong, then God's going to take care of that. It's not my job. Okay? But then he said, as for you, you meant evil against me. And he's like, guys, when you sold me into slavery, you meant to do it, and it was evil. But listen to this. But God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. In other words, Joseph is saying, guys, I know what you did was evil, but God took that. God took that and actually used it so that I could help others, millions of people who would have been without food had Joseph not gone through all of that. Okay, had Joseph not been sold into slavery, he never would have been second in command in Egypt and never would have saved all the food and been able to distribute it to all those people during that 7-year famine. And so that's what Joseph's saying. He's like, guys, I've already forgiven you. I've already forgiven you. Okay? And so we have to do the same thing when other people hurt us. Okay? I bet nobody listening here has ever been sold into slavery, which is pretty bad. And I doubt any of us have ever had anything as bad as that happen to us. So if Joseph can forgive his brothers for what they did to him, surely we can forgive our brothers and sisters when they do something wrong to us. That's why Jesus died on the cross. Jesus died on the cross so we could be forgiven and so we can forgive others as well. So think about that this week. Think about Joseph as an example of that, because if anybody had the right to continue to be mad at his brothers, it was Joseph. But he chose to forgive so that his heart would be able to move on. And then, of course, now his brothers are able to move on as well. All right, guys, so that's our story of Joseph. Once again, if you want to read that on your own, Genesis starts in chapter 37 all the way to the end in chapter 50 in Genesis. All right, keep reading your Bibles, guys. Keep praying, and we'll see you right here next week at Totally His. God bless.